Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about one of the key takeaways from the World Economic Forum in Davos only a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, the forum published their annual Global Risks Report. This 114-page document was developed in partnership by the Zurich Insurance Group and the Marsh and McLennan group of companies. Insurance companies make it their business to understand risk. But before we can dive into the content of the report, it's important to actually define what risk means. Risk, by definition, is something that's not in your plan. If you plan for 4 weeks of weather delay in your project and you only experience 3 weeks of weather delay, then the weather delays are not a risk because they're already accounted for in your plan. Risks are anything outside your plan. When we talk about risk, we divide the risk into two components, likelihood and impact. The likelihood is, well, how likely is that risk to come true? The impact is the actual impact of the risk if it comes true. The purpose of talking about risks is to ensure you've got contingency plans for the risks that represent a real threat to your business. The top 3 risks named in the report, in terms of likelihood, are all environmental. These encompass extreme weather events like earthquakes and hurricanes and things like that. It's amazing to me how in this day and age in 2019, the number of commercial property owners that are still underinsured in high-risk areas. Taking the time to read and understand your insurance policies, understand their limitations, is vitally important. Insurance policies can be incredibly complex to understand. It can be language in one section that's in conflict and superseded by opposing language in another addendum. When a claim is made under a policy, the claims department will then send the policy off to legal for review. And that process makes the insurance company your legal adversary at that point in time. Their job is to pay out as little as possible under the policy. The highest likelihood man-made risks are theft and cyber attacks. And here too, this is an area where there are simple procedural safeguards that you can employ to protect your business. This past week, I was speaking with the owner of a jewelry business who has experienced employee theft on multiple occasions. We're talking about theft in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Cyber theft is another major real issue, and it continues to make headlines. Data breaches have exposed personal data of billions of people. The largest was in India, where the government ID database reportedly suffered multiple data breaches and potentially compromised the records of all 1.1 billion registered citizens. It was reported in January that criminals were selling access to the database at a rate of 500 rupees for every 10 minutes. And in March, a data leak at the state-owned utility company allowed anyone to download the names and ID numbers of the customers. It amazes me that in that environment where there's so much cyber hacking going on, people still send wire transfers via email without an old-fashioned safety protocol to double-check the details by phone. If your investor sends a wire transfer and the email is hacked and the money ends up in the wrong account, you may be liable for hundreds of thousands of irrecoverable stolen funds. Another major threat, the IMF expects real GDP growth to decelerate from 2.4% in 2018 to 2.1% this year and to 1.5% by 2022. We're talking about global gross domestic product. Economic slowdowns can be a real threat to you indirectly. Reason for this is because our financial system is based on debt, and the justification for the ever-growing debt is in the presence of economic growth. In a shrinking environment, growing debt can cause a financial collapse. In its latest Global Financial Stability Report, the IMF reported that countries that are in the emerging markets with high dollar-denominated liabilities, when interest rates were low, they were doing just fine. But as interest rates have increased, the threat to those countries has grown dramatically. By October of last year, more than 45% of low-income countries were at high risk of debt distress or default. That's up from about a third in 2016. This means we're likely to have another credit crisis, like we did in 2008, but this time the cause is going to be different. The cause will not be collateralized debt obligations or bad mortgages. It's going to be sovereign debt from one or more countries defaulting on their debt obligations. The level of financial interconnectedness and counterparty risk in the market is really difficult to quantify. It means keeping a certain amount of liquidity as a war chest to protect your business in the event that liquidity was to dry up in the market for a period of time. You've all heard that cash is king, and in times of financial crisis, it's important to have cash reserves. In the coming days, we may highlight a few more items that came out of the World Economic Forum. As you're thinking about that, Have a spectacular rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.